Now presents a reading of articles and features from USA Today for Friday, March 13th. Friday the 13th. I've already walked under a ladder, had a black cat cross my path. So far, so good. Hopefully, your luck stays with you also. I'm Chet Walczyk. I'm glad you're here, and we'll kick it off with the weekend edition of USA Today and their cover section. War cost top $11 billion in 6 days. The first 6 days of war in Iran cost U.S. taxpayers at least $11.3 billion in munitions alone, according to Pentagon estimates reviewed by lawmakers, and experts say the final cost will only increase. That total does not include the cost of operating and maintaining the military force engaged in the war or battle damage sustained from Iran's attacks. The military used about $5.6 billion in munitions in the first 2 days of the conflict, according to a person with knowledge of the estimate. The munition cost was first reported by the Washington Post. The money spent on munitions and the added expense of any damage done to U.S. military infrastructure by Iran's retaliatory attacks on U.S. bases are not factored into the Pentagon's yearly trillion-dollar budget. Given this deficit, President Trump could ask Congress for more money to fund the war, but no such request has been submitted as of yet. The United States and Israel launched joint attacks on Iran on February 28th, bringing to an abrupt end at least a year of negotiations between the Trump administration and the country over its nuclear program. Since then, U.S. and Israeli forces have killed many of Iran's top political and military leaders and launched a bombing campaign that has killed more than 1,200 Iranians. Trump officials have refused to lay out a definitive timeline for the war. Trump told reporters on March 9th that it is, quote, very complete and will wrap up very soon, without elaborating on when it would end. Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth said at a news conference the following day, "Today will be, yet again, our most intense day of strikes inside Iran." Democratic lawmakers, including Senators Jack Reed of Rhode Island and Tim Kaine of Virginia and Representative Steny Hoyer of Maryland, have cited a daily cost of the war of about $1 billion based on media reports. According to a cost analysis by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, in the first 100 hours of the war, the U.S. military burned through an estimated $891 million per day for a total of $3.7 billion. "I have heard the $1 billion a day number," said Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, adding he couldn't fully confirm its veracity. "I've asked this question before, and it's been avoided by the top Pentagon officials. They have been totally unforthcoming about the cost. So, I'm not holding my breath," he added. Before entering a classified briefing with military leaders on March 10th, Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts told reporters, "While there is no money for 15 million Americans who lost their health care, there's $1 billion a day to spend on bombing Iran." Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, among the leading war hawks on the Hill, called the reported $1 billion daily Iran cost the best money ever spent. What's it worth to America to take down a religious Nazi regime who's trying to build a nuclear weapon to deliver to America? That's a really good investment, he said. The $11.3 billion spent on munitions in the war's first day is more than Congress allocated to the National Cancer Institute, and is nearly as much as the $12.4 billion Congress marked off for Head Start, the widely used preschool program for low-income children across the United States. The CIS report estimated that the vast majority of the cost for 100 hours of war, about $3 billion, represents the value of expended munitions. The daily cost will likely diminish as the U.S. military shifts from firing the expensive weapons it used in the first few days to hit Iran from afar to dropping free-falling bombs now that Iran's air defenses have been degraded, according to Mark Cancian, senior advisor for the Center's Defense and Security Department, who co-authored the report. The costs were very high for the first couple of days, Cancian said. Going forward, the cost will be probably half that, since we are using much less expensive munitions. Admiral Bradley Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, said on the fourth day of the war, the United States used more than 2,000 munitions to hit nearly as many targets. General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told reporters on March 4th that the military was shifting from using large, deliberate weapons fired from outside the reach of Iran's defenses to precision strikes with weapons like free-falling Joint Direct Attack munitions, or JDAMs, and Hellfire missiles, which hit targets up to 15 miles and 6 miles away, respectively. Those are much cheaper than the long-range weapons the U.S. military was launching at Iran in the war's first few days, such as a Tomahawk missile, which cost about $3.6 million, as compared with the $80,000 price tag for a JDAM. The United States also fired dozens of expensive Patriot and THAAD missile interceptors in the war's first 100 hours to defend against Iran's attacks targeting U.S. bases and its allies in the region. All told, defense munitions used in that span cost more than $1.6 billion. Those costs could drop as the United States takes out more of Iran's ballistic missile launchers. Kane told reporters on March 10th that Iran's ballistic missile attacks continue to trend downward towards 90%, and its one-way attack drones have decreased 83% since the beginning of the war. But the cost of operating the massive U.S. naval fleet stationed in the Middle East will steadily grow by about $15.4 million every day, the report found. Heidi Peltier, a senior researcher at Brown University's Cost of War Project, said any specific dollar figure for the war's cost would be, in some sense, always an underestimate. If the military's attacks on Iran intensify, the cost per day might not go down, even if the cost per weapon is going down. Peltier noted that the war is being funded through debt that will carry extra interest costs. Other costs will compound down the line, like obligations to veterans serving in this war, as well as economic impacts, some already emerging as the conflict threatens to engulf the Strait of Hormuz, a key oil shipping channel. Past precedent for the United States wars in the Middle East suggests the final price tag could dwarf current estimates. While initial cost estimates for the U.S. wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were around $50 to $60 billion, they ended up costing a combined $8 trillion, according to analysis by Costs of War. Speaking on the Senate floor on March 11th, Senator Jack Reed, the top Democrat on the Senate Armed Services Committee, said reports have said Trump could ask for potentially more than $50 billion in emergency funding for the war. The day prior, Reed sent a letter to Hegseth urging the Trump administration to provide more information to Congress about the daily cost of the war, how much more money the military may request to support troops in the region, and when Hegseth plans to request it. The American people deserve to know what this war is costing in blood and treasure, he wrote. And speaking of war-related issues, here is an interesting take. Gamers vie in Army's drone competition. First of its kind contest recruiting for new skills. Dateline, Huntsville, Alabama. The, quote, hunter lifted off first, scanning the grassy terrain for targets. Then came the, quote, killers, drones that would hit them. With an insect-like hum, they rose one by one from the launch pad and buzzed away, high over the flat, muddy landscape. Simulating a real-life battle scenario, the soldiers huddled beneath a grove of trees, holding small controllers with joysticks akin to Nintendo Switch consoles. The drone operators hustled out to the launch pad, dropped the drones, and then dashed back to take cover. The mission? To use the Hunter drone to identify and killer drones to hit 5 high-value targets from 1,000 meters up. And they had 30 minutes to do it. It is not as easy as it looks, Staff Sergeant Salillo Fano, 31, one of the soldiers, told USA Today after the competition ended. One thing that helps a lot with training, he said, is playing video games. The Army's first-of-its-kind drone warfighter competition in February came amid a sweeping effort by the Pentagon to embed drones in every branch of the military, just weeks before the United States launched a war in Iran. The event highlights a skill set some of these young soldiers honed long before they put on a uniform. The Army needs adept drone operators, and one thing the best pilots often have in common, Army leaders say, a knack for gaming. Were you a good gamer? Do you build drones in your basement for fun? What made you have this passion, this desire to be good at this? This is what the Army is asking as it searches for the next generation of recruits who can adeptly operate drones, said Colonel Nicholas Ryan, member of Pentagon Chief Pete Hegseth's drone dominance team and the Army lead for the Huntsville competition. The mid-February event kicked off under gray skies on the University of Alabama's drone testing range. On an obstacle course at the center, drones roughly the size of a microwave oven whizzed through circular plywood cutouts, backflipped over shipping carts, dodged an all-terrain vehicle, and slalomed through a set of columns. From a tent on the side, a pair of soldiers delivered their best sports commentator impressions. "And we're off," one said. The first round moving aggressively through the yellow obstacle. Those competitors sail through, over the Humvee, and through our last obstacle. The crowd sporadically responded with cheers and oohs. Many drones sputtered to the ground before they crossed the first huddle or crashed spectacularly into a wall. Meanwhile, Fano from American Samoa and his partner, Sergeant Carter Shook, 22, a Pennsylvania native, were competing as a team in another event where soldiers race against the clock to smear camouflage paint on their faces, hoist water bottles over their heads, run sandbags up and down a stretch of land, and then hustle about a mile across the muddy turf with their drones strapped to their backs. The soldiers darted out from the trees, dropped their drones on a launch pad, and sent them whizzing into the sky. Then they rushed back to their operating spot, scribbling notes on a pad and flipping on goggles to check their flight path. "I have not slept in 48 hours, one soldier told another as they prepared to start the competition. As soon as I finish this, I faceplant." The 200-plus competitors included soldiers who had first touched a drone months prior and seasoned veterans who had spent more than a decade piloting drones in various settings. One competitor, a member of the Army Reserves, uses drones in his package delivery civilian job. Another flew drones for 13 years as a personal hobby. Most who spoke to USA Today said gamers make better drone operators. Specialist Evan De Silva, 28, a contender in the Hunter Killer competition, said he flew his first drone just months before. "There are video games that you can use to help you get, not exactly like this, but pretty damn close," he said. "Gamers will pick up flying these a lot faster than people that don't play video games," said Sergeant Corey Cohn, 25, a member of the Army's 5-month-old drone team based in Fort Rucker, Alabama. The selected team was at the competition to sniff out recruits with drone operator chops. During a recent recruitment drive, just 20 people were picked from more than 120 applicants, the Army said. Hegseth and Army Secretary Dan Driscoll have ambitious goals for amping up the Army's drone program. The Army aims to buy 1 million drones by 2028 compared with the current rate of roughly 50,000 purchased annually. In recent years, critics in Washington and the defense industry have voiced growing concerns that the U.S. military lags China in preparing for future wars in which humans will no longer be seated in the cockpit. In a nod to those critics, Trump signed an executive order last June aimed at unleashing drone dominance, and Hegseth issued a memo shortly thereafter rescinding a restrictive policy that hindered production and limited access to drones. Drones have already played a new role in the war that the United States and Israel launched February 28th in Iran. The U.S. Central Command used one-way attack drones in combat for the first time in the initial attack. The military's plans to combat drones came into sharp focus this month after disputes at the southern border triggered two airspace closures in Texas, just weeks apart. In mid-February, aviation officials suddenly shut down the El Paso airspace after border officials fired a military laser meant to take out threatening drones at an object that turned out to be a party balloon. 2 weeks later, the airspace around Fort Hancock, about 50 miles southeast, was shut down after the military used the device to shoot a drone that ended up belonging to Customs and Border Protection. Military leaders also are watching the war in Ukraine with a growing sense of urgency. First-person view, or FPV drones, the type used in the Army competition, have dominated the battlefield in Ukraine as it has sought to fend off Russia's more substantial military. In Ukraine, the gamification of drone warfare has been far more explicit. Ukraine's military has created a drone bonus system in which drone operators are awarded points for wounding and killing Russian troops that they can exchange for new weapons on an Amazon-like online marketplace. This concept is not new in the United States, where the military maintains a mutually beneficial relationship with gaming companies and communities. For decades, military services have used simulators based on commercially available video games to train soldiers. During the last fiscal year, the Army spent roughly $10 million on gaming technology in support of Army training, according to budget documents. Military handsets to control weapon systems are modeled on Xbox and PlayStation controllers. Branches of the military each have their own esports teams that compete against one another and in competitions with civilian teams. The military aims to recruit young people through its gaming content on streaming platforms such as Twitch and ads that resemble popular teen games. The Army's Twitch channel stirred controversy in 2020 when it banned users who asked questions in gaming chats about war crimes. The gaming industry, in turn, hires retired generals as advisors and sells equipment perfected by commercial designers to the military. In Call of Duty, a video game, the realistic game players can net a hunter-killer drone as a reward for racking up roughly 6 kills. The Pentagon and the gaming industry use each other opportunistically, said Matthew Thomas Payne, an associate professor at the University of Notre Dame who studies gaming culture and wrote Playing War: Military Video Games After 9/11. The video game industry will look at the military and say, what kinds of assets can you provide us so that we can make our games more realistic, he said. The military sees the video game industry as soft power. It's a way of leveraging popular culture to win hearts and minds. Wayne Phelps, a retired Marine Corps lieutenant colonel and author of On Killing Remotely, The Psychology of Killing with Drones, said it makes sense that the military would recruit gamers with transferable skills, such as good hand-eye coordination and the ability to multitask, to be drone operators. It's how you would recruit anybody for a job, said Phelps, who commanded a drone squadron on counterterrorism operations. In interviews for Phelps' book, drone pilots told him that they rejected the notion that they did not understand what they were doing was real and understood that they were often using lethal force and taking human lives. As the Pentagon and the defense industry rushed to embrace drones and recruit skilled young people to operate them, the well-being of drone operators is often ignored, said Tanner Yackley, a retired Air Force drone pilot who founded Remote Warrior, a mental health advocacy organization for drone pilots. You have all these people in industry pushing, looking at what's the end goal, and you're skipping the human in the loop, he said. Quick reflexes developed from a gaming hobby might lend themselves to operating a drone, Yackley said. But video games were nothing like his experience of remote warfare around the world, including in Afghanistan, from thousands of miles away in Las Vegas. That job chewed me up and spit me out, he said. Yackley described the experience of his 4-year stint flying daily remote combat missions during the height of the War on Terror, sleeping 2 hours a night and working for 7, watching bloody footage of drone kills dozens of times over, suffering from nervous system fragmentation caused by always having a finger on the trigger. Viewing him as a desk job worker, Yackley said, veterans doctors dismissed his debilitating post-traumatic stress. You are listening to reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 22 minutes after the hour. And let's do a flip here and take a look at the weather, or weather-related story. Record-setting El Nino may be brewing, forecasters say. Get ready. The world's most influential natural weather feature is coming in for a landing. The El Nino cometh, said climate scientist Zeke Hausfather on X recently. An El Nino is forecast to develop later in 2026 along the equator in the eastern Pacific Ocean, and some signs show it will be a strong one, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Climate Prediction Center said yesterday. The developing El Nino may affect the number of hurricanes we can expect in the 2026 hurricane season, which officially begins on June 1st. It may bring strong heat waves, droughts, and flooding globally. In addition, El Nino often leads to some of the hottest years on record, such as the record-breaking worldwide average temperature in 2024. If El Nino develops as expected, it would push up our estimate for 2026 global temperatures, though it's still unlikely to surpass 2024 as the warmest year, and also make 2027 very likely to be the warmest year on record, Hausfather said. The current La Nina climate pattern is fading to eventually be replaced by a strong El Nino pattern, according to NOAA's Climate Prediction Center. The likelihood of an El Nino forming in the late summer is currently estimated by the CPC at 62%. It's expected to persist through at least the end of 2026, the Prediction Center said, which officially declared an El Nino watch. Even though model forecasts are relatively less accurate this time of the year, the increasing odds of El Nino are supported by the large amount of heat in the subsurface ocean and the expected weakening of the low-level trade winds, the report said. If El Nino forms, the potential strength remains very uncertain, with a 1 in 3 chance that it would be strong during October to December of this year, the report said. And what exactly is El Nino? El Nino is a natural climate pattern in which surface seawater temperatures in the central and eastern tropical Pacific Ocean are warmer than average. El Nino was originally recognized by fishermen off the coast of South America in the 1600s with the appearance of unusually warm water in the Pacific Ocean around Christmas. The entire natural climate cycle is officially known as El Nino Southern Oscillation, called ENSO by scientists. The cycle swings between warmer and cooler seawater in a region along the equator in the tropical Pacific. La Nina is marked by cooler than average ocean water. Although they're not official terms, some excited scientists and headline writers have dubbed the potentially strong El Nino a super or Godzilla El Nino. Government scientists say there's a 1 in 3 chance of the El Nino reaching strong levels. One other expert, though, said a strong one could be on the way. Whoa, said climate scientist Daniel Swain recently in an X post after reviewing the latest model data. All signs are increasingly pointing to a significant, if not strong to very strong El Nino event. And you and I may ask, why do we care about El Nino? The ENSO cycle is the primary factor government scientists consider when announcing their winter weather forecast because it mainly influences our weather in the colder months. During an El Nino winter, the southern third of the United States typically experiences wetter than average conditions, while the northern third, that's us, sees enhanced chances of below normal precipitation, according to the Climate Prediction Center. As for temperatures, El Nino winters are typically warmer across the continental United States, especially from the Pacific Northwest to the Great Lakes. Matthew Rosenkrantz, NOAA's lead hurricane seasonal forecaster, said in an email. El Nino can have a huge impact on the severity of the hurricane season in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Typically, El Nino leads to more rising air over the tropical Pacific, which then leads to stronger upper-level wind shear and sinking air across the tropical Atlantic, said associate scientist Andy Hazelton of the University of Miami. Well, if El Nino means a little milder winter for us next year, I'm all for it. Bring it on. You are listening to a reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 27 minutes after the hour. And we move over to the USA Today opinion section. We have a column written by Khalid Syed. Mr. Syed is the leader of the opposition for the African National Congress in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, a former provincial leader of the ANC Youth League, and an experienced public servant who has represented South Africa internationally. He is a long-standing social activist committed to social cohesion and democratic renewal in a post-apartheid society. And Mr. Syed's piece comes to us under the title, Ice-Tested Olympics. Next up is the World Cup. The Winter Olympics in Italy have ended, and the Winter Paralympics are ending March 15th. But the political storm and protest that the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement stirred up have not been forgotten. With the FIFA World Cup set to bring millions of international fans to North America, the Olympic backlash now feels less like an isolated controversy and more like a warning of what could lie ahead. The last Men's World Cup drew about 1 million international visitors in 2022 to Qatar. The 2026 tournament, 48 teams hosted across Canada, Mexico, and the United States from June 11th through July 19th, is expected to attract several times that number, making it the largest in the history of football, or what we Americans call soccer. The success of this World Soccer Tournament will hinge not only on logistics and policing, but also on whether teams and supporters feel welcome, safe, and able to move across borders within tight time frames. That confidence is now under scrutiny. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons has said that the agency will be a key part of the overall security apparatus for the World Cup. Yet, when immigration enforcement becomes visibly woven into the staging of a global tournament, it ceases to look like routine security and instead risks appearing as a projection of domestic policy onto an international stage. Already, there are increasing calls to avoid the event for safety reasons, with fan groups like Football Supporters Europe expressing concern of the ongoing militarization of police forces in the United States. A major German team has canceled a U.S. tour, and online fan forums debate boycotts. Meanwhile, supporters from Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East are already asking whether a valid visa will be enough. Could minor paperwork errors lead to detention? For mixed status families living in the United States, the anxiety must be sharper still. Sport has always intersected with politics. The 1936 Berlin Olympics were carefully orchestrated by the Nazi regime to project ideological confidence and international legitimacy. Decades later, the global boycott of apartheid South Africa, leading to the country's barring from the 1964 Olympic Games, showed that tournaments can reflect moral choices. More recently, Russia was banned from the Winter Olympics after it invaded Ukraine in 2022. At the Milano Cortina Games, there were no Russian flags or anthems, but Russians were allowed to compete as neutral athletes. The same held true for Belarus, which supports Russia in the war. However, the International Paralympics Committee voted to allow those nation athletes to compete. And on March 9th, the Russian national anthem was played at the Paralympics for the first time since 2014, as one of its skiers received a gold medal. And now there's a new geopolitical complication. The escalating conflict between the United States and Iran has pulled soccer into the center of a war involving one of the tournament's own host nations. Since February 28th, U.S. and Israeli strikes have killed the nation's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, and dozens of top officials. Iran has responded with attacks on U.S. military facilities and other targets in surrounding Middle East countries. The Iranian sports minister, Ahmad Danyamali, has announced that his country is pulling out of the North American tournament. Considering that this corrupt United States regime has assassinated our leader, under no circumstances can we participate in the World Cup, he said. Yet, there is a difference between holding regimes accountable and turning sporting events into stages for domestic enforcement policy, a distinction that matters especially for America, whose global appeal has long rested on openness and pluralism. The World Cup is a soft power moment. For nearly 6 weeks, North America will present itself to billions of viewers not just as a host, but also as a harmonious society, a rare global moment when rival nations share rules, rituals, and space on equal terms. That is precisely why international bodies have treated football as a tool for cohesion rather than division. The United Nations has repeatedly promoted sport as a mechanism for refugee integration and social stability, while organizations working on counter-extremism and discrimination, including the Muslim World League under Secretary General Mohammed Al-Issa, has similarly highlighted how athletics can cultivate understanding, empathy, and respect across communities. If enforcement spectacles overshadow the 2026 World Cup, the consequences will be economic as well as social. Travel hesitancy, empty seats, and reduced tourism would be immediate effects. But the deeper risk is political. Visible exclusion at a global event reinforces narratives of division and grievance that extremists on all sides are quick to exploit. When people feel unwelcome in shared civic spaces, mistrust grows, and the integrative power that sport is meant to provide begins to erode. That makes clarity from federal authorities essential. The United States Department of Homeland Security, the State Department, and host cities should coordinate to publish tournament-specific guidance covering visa processing guidelines, entry procedures for ticket holders, and the scope of enforcement activity around official venues. Clear assurances that immigration sweeps will not be conducted at stadiums, accredited fan zones, or public watch sites would reduce uncertainty without compromising border security. For a country that prides itself on being a nation of immigrants, and for a president who places great stock in ratings, turnout, and global spectacle, the 2026 World Cup presents an extraordinary opportunity to show that security and openness can coexist. Full stadiums and strong international attendance would reinforce the image of a confident and welcoming host. You are listening to reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 36 minutes after the hour, and we jump over to the USA Today Money section, which on Fridays, at least, has become the travel and tourism section. They never give us any money advice anymore. Well, I guess some ways it's money advice, so let's take a look. Taking a pass on Mexico this year. Spring breakers are looking for alternatives due to crisis. Spring break may look a bit different for some travelers this year. Recent geopolitical escalations like the death of Mexican cartel leader El Mencho and the war in Iran upended many people's travels, leaving some stranded from closed airspaces or sheltering in place. Even destinations that aren't necessarily directly impacted or in a conflict zone, like Egypt and Dubai, experienced a ripple effect of travel disruptions. Susan Morrow, CEO of Insure My Trip, told USA Today. On February 28th, the State Department issued an alert advising Americans worldwide to exercise increased caution. With spring break just around the corner, some travelers are rethinking their upcoming international trips. They worry about their safety and feel uneasy about crossing borders. So, they are exchanging their plans, even to perennial spring break destinations such as Mexico, for other destinations that may feel safer. A lot of people are shaken, and they're just saying, you know what? If I'm trying to go and have peace of mind on spring break, and I can go somewhere else, I'm going to opt for that, said Tyler Hosford, Security Director at global risk mitigation company International SOS. It's more this mindset of I'm trying to go and relax, have a margarita, and not have to worry about things. Yes, it's safe, but could I just go somewhere else? Here's where spring breakers can go this year. Oh boy. It varies, according to Hosford. For destinations in Europe, East Asia, and Australia, travel is still pretty much business as usual, he said. However, travel to parts of Africa and South Asia, such as Sri Lanka or Thailand, has been more affected by the war in Iran. A lot of travelers from Europe and from the United States and Canada will travel through those Middle East hubs, he said, adding that people have to change their connecting flights, likely adding more travel time also. People might say, you know what? Maybe we'll just postpone. Mexico's recent civil unrest also put some travelers on edge, with the travel insurance platform SquareMouth reporting a six-fold surge in customer calls specifically about Mexico. Hosford said that he is seeing clients switch spring break trips from Mexico to Hawaii, Florida, and other places in the Caribbean. For the most part, travel to Mexico should be safe, especially if you're staying in a popular resort area. The parts of Mexico outside of Jalisco, where a lot of the cartel activity was concentrated, are really returning to normal, said Hosford. Places like Cabo San Lucas, San Jose del Cabo, Cancun, some of those are now safe to go. Here are the top trending spring break destinations for March and April, according to Hopper Technology Solutions. Number 1, Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic. Number 2, San Juan, Puerto Rico. Number 3, Fort Myers, Florida. And number 5, Sarasota, Florida. The Caribbean is surging interest with American spring breakers, And here are some of the most booked destinations on Hooper for March and April, along with average round-trip airfare from the United States. San Juan, Puerto Rico checks in at $300 in airfare. Santo Domingo, $329. Punta Cana, Dominican Republic at $402. Montego Bay, Jamaica at $372. And we rounded out with Kingston, Jamaica, showing an average airfare of $403. And this seems to be the theme of today's travel and tourism section. Cruise travelers have concerns. With spring break cruise season upon us, recent geopolitical events around the globe have scrambled travel plans, and passengers may be second-guessing their destinations. Cruise passengers were among those stranded after the United States and Israel's war with Iran began, with the conflict forcing ships to abandon their original itineraries as guests struggled to get home. The United States Department of State urged travelers to leave more than a dozen countries, including the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Egypt, citing serious safety risks. Earlier this month, unrest erupted in Puerto Vallarta and other parts of Mexico after El Niño, who led the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, was killed during a Mexican military operation on February 22nd. Several Carnival Cruise Line, Holland America, and Princess cruise ships opted to skip stops in the city through at least yesterday, parent company Carnival Corporation said. Officials have reassured travelers of their safety, with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum Pardo saying the situation had calmed down. However, experts said cruise lines are well equipped to make changes as needed to protect their guests. Number one, no one wants to put people in harm's way, Stephanie Goldberg Glazer, Chief Experience Officer and owner of the travel agency Live Well Travel, often said. And number two, these cruise lines have a lot of skin in the game. So here's what to know. Just because a cruise ship is scheduled to visit a port does not necessarily mean conditions on the ground are completely safe, said Carrie Pasquarello, CEO of Global Secure Resources, a company focused on risk mitigation and threat assessment planning. Travel risk is fluid, she said. Circumstances, from crime to environmental conditions, can change rapidly. What looks stable one day can shift the next, especially in tourist spots, she said in an email. The good news is that the cruise industry is very experienced at managing these risks. Goldberg Glazer echoed that. She noted that while popular ports in Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao are not far from Venezuela, where Trump ordered U.S. forces to capture its leader in January, cruise ships have visited in recent weeks without incident. You really have to decide what you're comfortable with, but you should also know that none of these big companies are in the habit of putting you in danger, she said. Cruise lines may adjust itineraries because of security concerns, such as military action or civil unrest, along with other reasons like severe weather. That could mean significant change, such as rerouting a Western Caribbean itinerary to the Eastern Caribbean, or a more minor switch, like replacing a single planned stop with another port or a day at sea. State Department travel advisories are also an important part of the overall safety picture, according to Pasquarello. My advice is simple. Don't just look at the advisory level. Look at what's driving it, she said. When travelers understand the risk indicators behind the rating, they can prepare smarter and travel with greater awareness and confidence. That's particularly important for cruise guests because some warnings may apply only to select cities or regions. Understanding the underlying indicators helps travelers make more informed decisions about excursions, transportation, and how they move around when they're in port, Pasquarello noted. That guidance can change as well. In the wake of the war with Iran, Viking canceled its Egypt departures through and including March 31st in an abundance of caution and in consideration of new guidance from the U.S. State Department. However, the cruise line later walked the decision back and said it planned to operate scheduled voyages starting yesterday. The official travel advisories have now been clarified, and the current advisory for Egypt remains the same as it was prior to the start of the recent conflict, Viking said. Pasquarella recommended doing some strategic research before leaving for a trip. I always tell travelers that preparation turns travel disruptions into manageable moments, she said. Here are some tips. Get to know the destinations, both the countries and any cities on the itinerary, and their cultures, climates, and crime. Planning is also a key. Have a communication plan so family or colleagues know how to reach you and how you'll check in, and a succession plan at work so any responsibilities there are covered in case the trip goes awry, she said. When booking shore excursions, Pasquarella recommended sticking to activities offered through the cruise line. Cruise lines' priority will always be guest safety, especially given the potential liability they could face if they were reckless in taking guests to an unsafe area, she said. Travelers who are nervous about visiting a destination on their own could go with a group, Goldberg Glazer suggested. If you're going with a group, then you have a guide, and you have local people to help you, she said. That's another way you can feel a little bit more confident. The State Department's Smart Traveler Enrollment Program, or STEP, gives travelers access to updates about their destination and helps embassies and consulates contact them in case of emergency. Also, pack extra medication. Ideally, another week's worth, just in case, Pasquarella said. Travelers should also consider medical and security membership services that provide evacuation support, medical assistance, and real-time security guidance while abroad from reputable companies like MedJet and Global Rescue, she added. Health insurance may not cover policyholders abroad, so double-check those items beforehand and look into travel insurance as needed. And finally, do not underestimate the value of a trusted travel advisor, Pasquarella said. They can offer guidance on the front end and help clients navigate any disruptions as they happen. She urged cruise guests to be proactive about safety. When an emergency happens, whether it's medical or security related, you don't want to be spending precious time researching who to call or what to do. You want experts already in place who can support you immediately. You are listening to reading of today's issue of USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 48 minutes after the hour, and we continue with the Money Tourist Travel section. So, guess what? Fireworks will be returning to Mount Rushmore. For the first time since 2020, fireworks will fly over Mount Rushmore ahead of Independence Day in honor of America's 250th birthday. The display will be held on July 3rd in partnership with the state of South Dakota, the National Park Service announced on March 9th. President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump attended the last fireworks celebration at the National Memorial. At the time, he said, "There could be no better place to celebrate America's independence than beneath this magnificent, incredible, majestic mountain and monument to the greatest Americans who have ever lived." Current South Dakota Governor Larry Roden has welcomed Trump back for this year's event, but not everyone may be eager for the festivities, nor will everyone be able to go. Here's how to get tickets. Hopeful attendees must get tickets through a recreation.gov. That's recreation.gov ticket lottery, as the event is not open to the general public. Also, it's open only to U.S. residents, according to the interagency website, which cites the administration's commitment to enhancing access for American residents. The ticket lottery opens April 8th to the 12th and results will be announced April 14th. Lottery applicants may request up to 4 tickets and a parking spaces or shuttle service with a $1 lottery application fee. Mount Rushmore's 2020 event prompted protest because of Trump's presence, and indigenous groups who view the monument as a symbol of the colonization of Native American lands. Attempts to hold fireworks at Mount Rushmore in 2021 and 2022 were rejected by the National Park Service under the Biden administration. In the 2022 denial letter, the National Park Service said multiple tribes viewed the fireworks display as an adverse effect to the traditional cultural landscape. The agency also said fireworks pose threats to the environment and memorial resources because of an increased fire threat. So again, if you want to jump into the lottery, it is recreation.gov, and that ticket lottery opens April 8th to the 12th. Good luck. Sounds like a lot of fun. Hey, guess what? When it comes to boarding, it's all about the money. Who would have thought? Saving time or making a few extra bucks? Southwest Airlines wasn't the first to do assigned seating, but it's certainly the latest to remind passengers that the aviation industry prioritizes money over efficiency. It's an extremely significant change for Southwest. It's one of the most monumental changes that Southwest has made as an airline because it changes a business process that the airline has used for 54 years. Henry Hartfeld, president of Atmosphere Research, a travel industry analytics firm, told me. Southwest recognized it could be much more competitive and much more profitable by embracing assigned seating and adding extra legroom seats. File this under, if you can't beat them, join them, he said. The move by Southwest, which was long known as a customer-friendly, quirky airline that went its own way on many policies, shows how the aviation industry has homogenized over the years and coalesced around the importance of Wall Street performance. Though Southwest did recently announce some tweaks after customers said the new process wasn't going so smoothly. Delta Airlines similarly updated its boarding processes in 2024, streamlining the way it classifies its boarding groups and assigning all passengers a group number rather than just those in the main cabin. American Airlines changed the boarding process to start 5 minutes earlier. Even though boarding by group is not the most efficient way to load an airplane from a time perspective, Hartsfeld said, it allows airlines to monetize the boarding process in a way that Southwest could not do as effectively when it had open seating. Researchers have shown time and again that boarding by group is not the most efficient way to load an airplane from a time perspective. Same goes for boarding back to front. Even a random free-for-all would likely take less time than the way airlines organize their boarding now, but the actual most efficient method, the Stefan method, is highly choreographed and would take full cooperation from everyone on each flight. The most efficient way to load a plane progresses as follows. Everyone sitting in odd number row window seats boards first, then even numbered row window seats, then odd numbered row middle seats, and so on. It's not necessarily an easy thing to implement. I wasn't going for whether it was easy or not. The question I was going for, what was the fastest? Jason Stefan, the researcher who first modeled the method in 2008, previously told me. There are some challenges to implementing my method. Everyone has to line up in a specific order. That is a solvable problem, but it's a solvable problem that has a cost. It's the cost that Stefan mentioned that's behind why airlines don't use his efficient boarding process. Airlines prioritize money, which they can extract from customers more easily with a less efficient boarding process. IdeaWorks Company, an aviation data analytics firm, projected in November that airlines globally would make $157 billion in ancillary revenue in 2025 from extra fees like those for priority boarding, seat selection, and checked bags. You can sense the fear and anxiety among the travelers at the gate, wondering if they will get their carry-on bags in the overhead bins, Hartfeld said. The reason that people value priority boarding isn't because they want to be squeezed into an airline seat for an extra 10 to 20 minutes. It's because they want more certainty that they will be able to get their carry-on into the overhead bins. Because of that fear and the desire not to have to gate check their bags, airlines are able to sell tickets with priority boarding at a premium or even sell boarding priority separately for its own fee. Airline finance teams are happy about the fact that people are anxious about boarding, Hartfeld said. You are listening to reading of articles and features from USA Today for Friday, March 13th on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We will return for more readings after this short break. Your reader for this hour has been Chet Walczyk. I appreciate you listening. If you're worried about Friday the 13th, well, be careful. And if you're not, walk under another ladder just like I did. Your reader for this hour has been me, Chet Walczyk. I'm glad you joined me. I hope you have a great weekend, and I look forward to our next get-together. Take care.
continue now with our reading of articles from today's issue of the USA Today. Your reader for this hour is Nancy. This is now time for the Life section, which is Section B for March 13th. The 98th Academy Awards. Sinners and Battle will win Throwdown for Movie Gold. From Brian Truitt. A little tumult is good during Oscar season. It makes awards predictions trickier, or more fun, depending on your perspective. Everything was falling too into place leading up to the March 15th Academy Awards, ABC and Hulu, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific. Paul Thomas Anderson's action dramedy thriller, One Battle After Another, seemed like it was pulling an Oppenheimer and steamrolling all the way to Best Picture glory. It even looked like Timothée Chalamet was a shoo-in for his first Oscar. Then the Actor Awards, formerly known as the Screen Actors Guild Awards, chose chaos. Sinners won Best Cast, giving One Battle some real competition for the Oscars' biggest prize. Michael B. Jordan snagged a surprise Best Actor win for Sinners, making that race tight. And weapons baddie Amy Madigan took home Supporting Actress, making her a favorite over a surging Teyana Taylor for One Battle. In fact, only Best Actress and Director seems like a lock's heading into Oscar night. Of course, that doesn't stop the fearless predictions of all the major categories. Just makes it extra fun. Best Picture. Begonia, F1 the Movie, Frankenstein, Hamnet, Marty Supreme, One Battle After Another, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, Sinners, and Train Dreams. Will Win, Should Win, Sinners. Like 2025 winner Anora, One Battle was a powerhouse with major momentum, capturing Best Film from the Directors Guild and Producers Guild of America until it lost Best Cast at the Actor Awards to Sinners. So will Ryan Coogler's horror film go all the way of Conclave and lose out on Oscar night? Even though One Battle doesn't have the mojo it once did, it likely pulls out a victory. Still, this is still no guts, no glory time. So let's go with the underdog pick. Sinners is the better film, and it has been too many way years. 34, in fact, since a horror movie nabbed Best Picture, The Silence of the Lambs. Best Actor, Timothée Chalamet, Marty Supreme, Leonardo DiCaprio, One Battle After Another, Ethan Hawke, Blue Moon, Michael B. Jordan, Sinners, Wagner Moura, The Secret Agent, Will Win, Should Win, Jordan. Chalamet's best chance of winning this category was last year for The Electric, A Complete Unknown, but it did seem like his to lose this year after early wins at the Critics' Choice and Golden Globe ceremonies. The occasional odd campaign moment and foot-and-mouth gaffe didn't help. Neither did Jordan getting top honors from his fellow thespians at the Actor Awards. At this point, the tide has turned to the Sinners star, grabbing his first Oscar. As it should, because Jordan's dual performance as twin gangsters dealing with a bunch of vampires crashing their juke joint, and the way he creates two distinct personalities for them, is amazing work. Best Actress, Jessie Buckley, Hamnet, Rose Byrne, If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, Kate Hudson, Song Sung Blue, Renate Reinsve, Sentimental Value, Emma Stone, Begonia, Will Win, Should Win, Buckley. At this point, Buckley not winning would be a jaw-dropping apocalyptic level shock. Usually one or two nominees will run the table during award season, often supporting actors such as Zoe Saldana and Kieran Culkin last year. This time it's the Hamnet actress, who has been unstoppable. And while it's a good crop of performances here, Buckley is the head of the class by a lot, turning in a gut-wrenching performance as a wife and mother dealing with personal struggles and family tragedy. She's arguably the best actress of her generation, and an Oscar cements it. Best Supporting Actor: Benicio del Toro, One Battle After Another; Jacob Elordi, Frankenstein; Delroy Lindo, Sinners; Sean Penn, One Battle After Another; Stellan Skarsgård, Sentimental Value; will win, Penn; should win, Elordi. The category that's a true toss-up. Elordi took Critics' Choice honors. Skarsgård got the Golden Globe, and Penn has won British Academy Film Awards, the BAFTA, and Actor Awards, and didn't show up for either. SAG's Honorays also has won Oscar every year since 2017. So history favors Penn. In a perfect world, there's a tie between beloved veteran actor Lindo and up-and-comer Elordi. If one needs to be chosen, though, it's Elordi, since his fabulous take as the iconic creature is what makes Frankenstein. But with the hope Lindo gets back one day to receive his well-deserved flowers. Best Supporting Actress: Ellie Fanning, Sentimental Value; Inga Ilsdatter-Lilius, Sentimental Value; Amy Madigan, Weapons; Wunmi Mosaku, Sinners; Teyana Taylor, One Battle After Another. Will win, should win, Madigan. This has been a tussle between Taylor and Madigan all award season. As the gleefully witchy Aunt Gladys, Madigan won the category at Critics' Choice. Taylor came back victorious at Golden Globes, and Madigan was honored again at Actor Awards. Musaki beat Taylor for the BAFTA trophy, though Madigan wasn't in the category. It'd be a nice feather in horror's cap if Mosaku or Madigan got the win. Yet Madigan picks up her first Oscar not only for a fabulous villain role, but also for a long, acclaimed career that dates back to the 70s. Best Director: Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another; Ryan Coogler, Sinners; Josh Safdie, Marty Supreme; Joachim Trier, Sentimental Value; Chloe Zhao, Hamnet. Will win, Anderson; should win, Coogler. Barring some unforeseen upset, Anderson will grab his first Oscar in a storied career. Directors Guild of America and Oscar are usually in lockstep, so that bodes well for the One Battle director. He cleaned up at Critics' Choice, Golden Globes, and BAFTAs, so the path is clear. However, it's downright absurd that no black filmmaker has ever won the Oscar, and in nearly a century of Academy Awards, only 7 have been nominated. Coogler crafted something supremely special with Sinners, and he's a true visionary, so a historic win would be apropos and welcome. Here's the movie reviews. Thrash jumps the shark in the best way, from Brian Truitt. Adam McKay's filmography is a vast ocean of diverse works with bite, from comedies Anchorman and Step Brothers to political satires Vice and Don't Look Up. He acknowledges that it feels a little more complete now that he has a shark movie to his credit. I'm one of those kids who, from like age 9 on, was a bit obsessed with sharks. And my wife always jokes I know way more than I should know about sharks, says McKay, producer of Netflix's new survival thriller Thrash, streaming April 10th. It's that primal fear. It's that awe of any apex predator. USA Today has the first look at Thrash, which is written and directed by Tommy Wirkola, Violent Night, and puts an environmental spin on a fearsome film subgenre. The action centers on a coastal South Carolina town that is hit by a Category 5 hurricane. The levees break, waters flood in, and bull sharks swim in looking for a meal. The movie follows various characters who have to deal with storm surges, plus the hungry fish, including a pregnant woman, played by Phoebe Never, an oceanic researcher, played by Djimon Hounsou, and his agoraphobic niece, Whitney Peace. Plus a trio of foster siblings, Elia Brown, Stacy Clausen, and Dante Ubaldi. Tranvor was very excited by the fact that her character Lisa is giving birth the whole movie and is also up against a hurricane as well as sharks, she says. Filming the movie offered the Bridgerton actress her own great challenge. We shot in Melbourne in winter, so it was freezing cold and we were in very cold tanks, shooting outside. So I'd wear 2 wetsuits underneath my pregnancy belly. The filmmakers settled on bull sharks as the film's primary antagonist because they're smart, drawn to dirty water, hunt in packs, and will actively attack people. They're aggressive predators that don't really discriminate that much, McKay says. Other sharks accidentally bite humans. They think they're seals or whatever. But if a person's in the water, bull sharks will come up and bite them. He teases another kind of shark has a significant cameo. Practical effects sharks were used, as well as shark pieces, but Tranvor's scenes mainly used digital creatures. She worked with some stunt guys with tennis balls, and that was about it, she says with a laugh. Not quite as scary. In fact, a little bit funny. It definitely required some acting. McKay has long been a connoisseur of fine fin flicks. Jaws is the granddaddy. No one will ever approach Jaws in open water is number 2 on his personal shark movie list. He's hoping Thrash places for fans in the next 5 or 6 others that are pretty darn good. His production company tries to do projects with global warming as an element, and Ricola came to McKay with the idea for Thrash 5 years ago. At the time, the premise seemed like a very heightened climate scenario, McKay says. But in the interim, the idea of dangerous predators being pushed toward human civilization is now pretty much happening every day. He promises that Thrash is still a popcorn movie at its heart. There's a little sprinkling of vitamins in there with the very stark reality of how quickly the planet is changing and weather. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time's 35 minutes after the hour. Here is a book review. Liza shares darkness and light in Hear This, from Cal Mulroy. When you're reading Liza Minnelli's memoir, picture the star on her lipstick-red couch, talking to you like a friend. Kids, wait till you hear this, out now from Grand Central Publishing, reads like a conversation with a close pal because it is one. Longtime friend Michael Feinstein started recording her telling her life story in her living room in 2014. In just more than 400 pages, Minnelli opens up about her childhood with her mother, Judy Garland, her career-making role in cabaret, and her journey to sobriety. While Minnelli, age 79, writes darker moments of grief and addiction, her memoir is an overall romp through life in showbiz, complete with plenty of witty zingers. Readers will delight in the who's who of Hollywood as Minnelli describes wild parties, toured affairs, and theater magic. A thorny relationship with Mom. From a young age, Minnelli details a thorny relationship with Garland, who abused drugs and alcohol for most of her adult life. Minnelli writes that Garland would remain in bed for days, depressed and heavily drugged. She also began confiding her fears, resentments, and anger to Minnelli when she was just 5 years old. While Garland and her husband at the time, Sid Luft, burst into vicious arguments, Minnelli escaped to the refuge of her father, Vincente Minnelli. Minnelli recalls several times Garland attempted suicide, including once when she was struggling with postpartum depression and drug abuse. Minnelli felt responsible for getting more prescription pills for her mother, but would often swap out pills for aspirin so Garland wouldn't overdose. The family was also flat broke at this time and sneaked out of hotels before checkout so they didn't have to pay the bill. At 13, I was my mother's caretaker. A nurse, doctor, pharmacologist, and psychiatrist rolled into one, she writes. On several instances, Minnelli writes that Garland tried to thwart her career, using Minnelli's boyfriends and the press as bargaining chips to get her to ditch off-Broadway gigs and be with her mother instead. When they performed together, Minnelli writes of palpable creative tension. None of this would have been apparent to anyone in the audience. They saw affection and love. Behind the scenes, Mama was proud, confused, and scared. She was holding the torch in front of me, but had no intention of passing it, Minnelli writes. Minnelli was 23 when her mother died from an accidental overdose at age 47. Despite their complicated relationship, Minnelli writes lovingly about her mother's legacy and their later memories together. Hollywood love affairs. Minnelli spares no detail about her 4 ex-husbands and Hollywood lovers, many of whom she remained on good terms with after they split. Minnelli was first married to Peter Allen, an Australian singer who later came out as gay. Minnelli walked in on him having sex with a man. She writes about a sexual energy with choreographer and cabaret director Bob Fosse and a disastrous affair with Martin Scorsese while filming New York, New York in the 70s. She takes readers through whirlwind romances with Broadway actor Ben Vereen and Desi Arnaz Jr., comedian Peter Sellers, and ex-husbands Jack Haley Jr. and Mark Garrow. If this is confusing to you, how the hell do you think I felt? Minnelli writes. I was married to a gay man at the same time I was engaged to 2 other men. She also shares regrets about her final, short-lived marriage to film producer David Jest, whom she says she married in 2002 when she was very lonely, despite feeling no physical attraction to him. Minnelli writes that Guest, who died in 2016, duped her into thinking he could make her career hotter than ever. He controlled who she hung out with and spoke to, wouldn't let her have her own phone, and spent her money extravagantly. They separated after 16 months, but officially divorced 4 years later. This marriage left her feeling disgusted and humiliated, and vowing never marry again, Minnelli writes. She felt sabotaged at Oscars. If you've learned anything about kids so far, it's that Minnelli is not afraid to name names, dead or alive. In the last chapter of her memoir, she critiques Lady Gaga, who wheeled her up on stage at the 2022 Oscars to present the Best Picture award. Minnelli expected to sit in her usual director's chair to give her back some relief. But just before she went on stage, Minnelli was informed she would only be allowed on stage if she used a wheelchair. Minnelli uses a wheelchair for going any distance, but never for performing, she writes. She found it insulting and fought back, but Gaga agreed with the producers that she would not go with her unless Minnelli was in a wheelchair. Then, incredibly, she asked if I wouldn't be better off going home. Why, was my incredulous answer. At one point, she quizzed me to see if my memory was intact, Minnelli says. Minnelli writes that she went on stage because it would be better than the speculation around it if she left, but that she felt sabotaged and so hurt by this young woman I had mentored and whose talents I admired and publicly acknowledged for many years. When she stumbled over her words on stage, Gaga held her hand and leaned over her. Minnelli writes that the seemingly gentle gesture garnered praise from the audience but made her feel humiliated because it was Gaga who had rattled her in the first place. Stephanie Germanotta, who created the fantasy of Lady Gaga, became someone I didn't know on Oscar night, Minnelli says. USA Today has reached out to Gaga and the Academy for comment. Keeping Addiction at Bay. Manelli writes extensively about her substance abuse disorder, which she calls a final gift, a genetic inheritance from Mama I couldn't escape. Her drug use started following Garland's death, when a doctor prescribed her Valium to get through the stress and tension. I'd had a front seat to Mama's demons, but I was convinced I was different, Manelli writes. As I learned, luck and brains have nothing to do with handling addiction. You're dealing with chemicals that are baffling, cunning, and powerful. Keep it up, keep denying it, and you'll become dependent on them sooner than you think. You'll fool yourself for years, even decades. Manelli writes that she continued using even while she was telling the public about her sobriety and recovery. In 2003, she writes that she collapsed drunk on the sideway in New York City and was almost comatose for God knows how long while passersby stepped over and around her body. Manelli is now 11 years sober, she writes. And now it's time for the sports section, which is section C. It's not broken, yet. March Madness expansion would punish Cinderellas, from Blake Topmeyer. Why does March Madness expansion dialogue persist? Because power conferences want more participation ribbons. Expansion would be a boon for power conference basketball teams that barely finish above 500. Collect your ribbon and head to the dance. What, though, would growing the NCAA tournament to 72 or 76 teams do for mid-majors? Take it from a guy who has spent most of his career coaching these teams. Tournament expansion probably ain't going to help the Sun Belt Conference, unfortunately, said Coach Scott Cross, whose Troy Trojans are headed to the NCAA tournament for a second straight year, after securing their conference's auto bid. He's right, of course, but you probably didn't need Cross to spell it out. You can add 2 plus 2 and know it equals Power 4. When was the last time a college sports evolution helped the little guy? This one wouldn't, either. The Sun Belt wouldn't benefit from tournament expansion. Neither would the Southland, the conference where Cross used to coach. Wouldn't help the Horizon either, or the Ohio Valley. I could go on and on, but you get the idea. I think the tournament is really special the way it is, Georgia Southern coach Charlie Henry said. So I'd probably not be in favor of expanding. Henry's Eagles won 5 games in 5 days to reach the Sun Belt Tournament final, before falling 1 win short of an auto bid. They won't sniff at an at-large selection to a 68-team bracket, and they wouldn't at 76 teams either. Expansion efforts aren't designed to help their kind. Don't misunderstand what Cross and Henry are saying. Neither coach stumped for the Sun Belt to get a second bid. In fact, both coaches admitted their conference is a one-bid league. Just don't expect them to support an expansion designed to benefit the 10th and 12th and 14th place teams from the power leagues. Tournament expansion would allow more teams than are average at the Power 4 level to get in, Cross said. I think the tournament is great the way it is. Amen, brother. Most fans would agree. Too bad they aren't calling the shots. March Madness expansion is all about the Power 4 dregs. Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, Brett Yormark, and Jim Phillips are like the 4 horsemen of the 68-team tournament apocalypse. These Power 4 conference commissioners just won't let the expansion idea go. Expansion would carve out bids for the dregs of the mega conferences these commissioners created. When you hear talk of a 76-team NCAA tournament, understand it's all geared towards rescuing teams like Auburn, 16 and 15, and Indiana 18-13 from the NIT, or declining an NIT bid rather and ushering them into the main event, courtesy of their repeated losses against better teams. True, the expanded bracket would occasionally gift an at-large bid to a mid-major from an upper-middle-class conference, but that'll come at a cost. For every 2024 Indiana State that will be buoyed by tournament expansion, there will be a half dozen bids for teams like this season's 14-loss Oklahoma Sooners. The real travesty of tournament expansion wouldn't even be the addition of more 14-loss teams from power conferences. That's not great. This is worse. In a 76-team bracket, several additional low and mid-majors could get relegated to play in games. That's right, to be assured of a spot in the round of 64, a mid-major might need to win its conference tournament and then also survive a game in Dayton, Ohio, or some additional site picked for the play-in Carnival. This, folks, is the real sucker punch. Imagine the case of Cross's Troy Trojans. They won the Sun Belt's regular season. They won the conference tournament. They're headed to NCAA's first round, for at least one more year anyway. In a 76-team bracket, they could be relegated to a play-in game. That's a slap of disrespect. And for what? So that a 12th place power conference team can get a participation ribbon. A bigger NCAA tournament might shift more Cinderellas to play in games. If a men's or women's team wins a conference tournament to secure an auto bid, that ought to be good for a spot in the round of 64, the round most of us normies consider the real start to the tournament. One 76-team format under consideration, according to On3's reporting last fall, would slot 12 auto-bid qualifiers into play-in games, as well as 12 at-large qualifiers into the play-in round. In other words, say goodbye to at least 6 potential Cinderellas before we even reach those Thursday and Friday, games we love so dearly. That means fewer small conference underdogs permitted access to the round of 64 to try to pull off what St. Peter's did to Kentucky, or what Princeton did to Arizona, or what UMBC did to Virginia, or Farley Dickinson did to Purdue. Those are my favorite 2 days the entire year. Those first 2 days, Cross said. He's not alone in that feeling, and we don't love those 2 days for the chalk. We love them because teams like Hampton and Norfolk State and Oakland can bounce a big boy and earn their one shining moment before the bigger brands reclaim the spotlight in the tournament's later stages. It's not broken, Cross said of the NCAA tournament. It's one of the greatest sporting events, in my opinion, anywhere. I love it the way it is. We love it in no small part because of the bracket-busting havoc underdogs inflict on Goliaths awash in booster bucks. If the power conferences get their expansion wishes, that'll just be more participation ribbons at Cinderella's expense. The Miami Redhawks lose in MAC, now on Madness Bubble. The Miami of Ohio men's basketball team is no longer undefeated. It now begins the hot debate of whether the Redhawks will make the men's NCAA tournament. The Redhawks suffered their first loss of the season, losing to Massachusetts 87-83 in the opening round of the MAC tournament March 12th. The top seed in the conference looked like it was cruising toward a victory when it took an 11-point lead with 8 minutes left. But the Minutemen got hot. They went on a 13-2 run to tie the score with 5 minutes to go, and it was back and forth the rest of the way. UMass took a 3-point lead with less than 3 minutes left, and Miami was able to tie it in the final minute. The Minutemen's Daniel Hankins Sanford hit the go-ahead bucket with 29 seconds left, and the Red Hawks weren't able to tie it. The biggest differential was UMass's dominance on the boards. It had 17 offensive rebounds, resulting in 23 second-chance points. With the loss, there are no more undefeated Division I men's basketball teams left in the country. Now, the rest of the week will be spent debating if Miami, 13-1, should be in March Madness. While it was the only undefeated team in the country, it didn't have a strong resume, as it ranked near the bottom of several strength schedule metrics. It is ranked 269th in KenPom in strength of schedule and has an overall rating of 93. In the all-important net rankings, Miami is number 54, a spot that isn't ideal for an at-large spot. The Red Hawks didn't have a Quad 1 win, just a 2-0 Quad 2 mark, while the majority of its games were Quad 4 opportunities. What didn't help was the loss to UMass, was a Quad 4 loss, as the Minutemen were the 8th seed in the tournament and were 16-15 coming into the contest. It's a mark teams cannot afford just days before Selection Sunday. Men's NCAA Tournament bracket announcement. It's March 15th at 6 o'clock Eastern on CBS. Men's NIT bracket announcements is March 15th, time to be determined after NCAA Tournament announced. Women's NCAA bracket announcement, March 16th at 8 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. Men's college basketball crown announcement, March 16th at 5:30 Eastern. You're listening to a reading of today's issue of the USA Today on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 56 minutes after the hour. Critical off-season moves make Rams early Super Bowl 61 favorite. From Tyler Dragon. March free agency madness is in full swing. It's a time when NFL teams set the blueprint for the upcoming season. There's already been a flurry of activity as the league's 2026 salary cap increased by $22 million. Plenty of clubs have already improved their rosters, but the LA Rams have been the most proficient. Within a week's span in March, the Rams acquired standout cornerback Trent McDuffie in a blockbuster trade with the Chiefs and doubled back in Kansas City to agree to terms with starting cornerback Jalen Watson, also formerly of the Chiefs. The Rams not only revamped their cornerback room with 2 starting corners, they also addressed their most glaring weakness. Los Angeles' secondary was the main reason it witnessed the Rams' NFC West rival, the Seattle Seahawks, hoist the Super Bowl 60 Lombardi Trophy. The back end of the Rams' defense got torched by Seahawks wide receiver Jackson Smith-Njigba in the NFC Championship game to the tune of 10 receptions, 153 yards, and 1 touchdown on its way to giving up 31 points. The shortcomings overshadowed the fact Matthew Stafford threw for 374 yards and 3 touchdowns. And they made Puka Naku's 9 receptions, 165 yards, and 1 touchdown performance an afterthought. LA's defense allowed 276 passing yards and 382 total yards per game in the playoffs, stats that rank them in the bottom 4 of all postseason teams. McDuffie and Watson will no doubt aid in shoring up the Rams' pass defense. McDuffie, a 2023 first-time All-Pro, has allowed just 6.2 yards per target over the last 4 seasons, the 10th fewest among qualified cornerbacks per Next Gen Stats. He also leads all cornerbacks with 34 quarterback pressures since 2022. Watson is coming off his best overall season in which he produced a career-best 2 interceptions. equaled a career best 6 pass deflections, and allowed a 69 passer rating when targeted, 8th in his position, per Pro Football Focus. Add recently re-signed defensive backs Cam Curl and Quinton Lake, and the Rams' secondary is in a much better position to complement a stout defensive front that features edge rushers Jared Verse and Byron Young, who combined for 19.5 sacks and 144 pressures last season. Sure, Stafford might not be able to replicate his 2025 NFL MVP campaign. It's still safe to assume the league's top offense from a year ago won't fall off a cliff. And if new Rams special team coordinator Bubba Ventrone coaches the unit to be among the league average, the Rams on paper are primed to go into next season with the most complete team in the NFL. Even before next month's draft, the Rams have no glaring holes. A lot of times, our macro philosophy is if we can use free agency to not be desperate in the draft, General Manager Les Snead said March 3rd. We more than likely will be better drafters because we're not reaching and we're not desperate. We're not going in there with a major void or major hole that has to be filled. That's usually the approach. Mission accomplished, Rams. The Rams and the Seahawks are tied for the best Super Bowl odds, per BetMGM. As the NFL officially started a new league March 11th, the Rams' offseason moves have already positioned themselves to make another Super Bowl run for 2026 that LA hosts. The last time Los Angeles hosted the Super Bowl at SoFi Stadium, it was the Rams who lifted the Lombardi Trophy. NFL Diversity Initiative comes back after hiatus. From Chris Bumbica. One of the NFL's diversity initiatives is back after a one-year hiatus, according to a league memo from league diversity officials addressed to chief executives, general managers, head coaches, and club presidents, obtained by USA Today Sports, with a new name and approach. The networking event, formerly known as the Front Office and General Manager Accelerator Program, is now the Coach and Front Office Accelerator and includes candidates from all backgrounds, not just racial or gender minorities. CBS Sports first reported the program's revival and changes. Started in 2022, the Accelerators program will bring candidates together for an in-person session from May 18th to 20th at the league's spring meeting in Orlando, Florida. The May meeting, scheduled for 2025, was canceled weeks prior. Though the NFL said the program was being reimaged, it was no secret the league sought compliance with President Donald Trump's anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, mandates. 10 head coaching jobs turned over this offseason. One team, the Tennessee Titans, hired a non-white person for the top gig, as Robert Saleh identifies as Lebanese American. Commissioner Roger Goodell said during his pre-Super Bowl news conference that he believed diversity is good for the league. You know me too well to say I'm resigned to something where I think we need to continue to make progress, he said. Goodell added, we still have work to do. There's got to be more steps. So we're reevaluating everything we're doing, including our accelerator program, to meet the challenges of today and tomorrow rather than yesterday. So we need to be looking at that to say, okay, why did we have the results this year? The memo states enhanced nomination criteria serve to focus on more senior level candidates aligned with head coach or general manager readiness. Clubs may nominate up to 2 candidates, ideally one front office member and one coach. The memo also promises year-round learning opportunities, including mentorship, personalized executive coaching, and specialized development sessions addressing the realities of life as an NFL head coach or general manager. Coaches eligible for the program must be a former NFL head coach, a current or former college coach, a current or former coordinator, or current or former quarterbacks coach. Front office nominees should be assistant general managers or be a head of player personnel, football operations, or administration. In the memo, the league claims 79 instances of a participant receiving an internal or cross-club promotion since the program's inception. Goodell said there was no correlation between the results of 0 black coaching hires and that the accelerator program had been dormant for nearly a year. The Rooney Rule requires teams to interview at least 2 minority candidates for a vacant head coach, general manager, and coordinator positions. 1 minority candidate is required for the quarterback coach position. I think long-term, it's something that we want to continue and figure out how do we use that to make sure that people understand that the level of talent is out there. The extraordinary talent is out there, Goodell said, and how to give them the opportunities to continue their careers. The Players of Golf Classic, nearly 5th major, from Adam Shepard. March is going to be major. That is the tagline of the PGA Tour's promotional campaign for the players, and it has sparked renewed debate of whether the Tour's flagship tournament should be promoted to major championship status. Our marketing department's really effective. They made 1 commercial spot, and we're all having this conversation, which is really interesting, said PGA Tour CEO Brian Rollup in his State of the Tour press conference March 11th. Kudos to them. Is the Players a major has been argued since before the first tee was stuck in the ground of a championship that dates to 1974. Before the first putt has been stroked, the first hot dog sold, or the first complaint made about the rough, it has been billed as golf's Super Bowl, wrote Golf Digest Dwayne Netland. This is quite a burden for an unborn event, no matter how noble its blood. But if the grandiose plans materialize, the Tournament Players Championship, the original name of the tournament, may become the sport's 5th major event. The debate has ebbed and flowed over the years, with the Players unofficially being tabbed the 5th major. The Tour's campaign subtly implies that the Players is a big deal, and had the feeling of the Tour shifting back to a hard sell that the Players deserve major status. We take a lot of pride in the Players, and with all the major talk, some may say even too much pride. Ultimately, that is not for us to decide, Rollup said. Listen, the talk on this should be a major, should it not be a major? I've learned a lot. I'm not entirely sure how majors become majors. The history is really interesting to study. There used to be more majors. There's fewer majors. I think what's important, that's not for us to decide. What's important is that this is a pretty special event, and I think among the best events in golf. So I think anyone you talk to, players, fans, partners, they'll tell you the same thing, and I think that should be celebrated. Davis Love III, who won the Players twice and the PGA Championship once during a Hall of Fame career, recalled former PGA Tour Commissioner Tim Finchem encouraging the Players to take the lead in promoting the Players as a major worthy. Tim said, I can't call it a major, but if you guys do, everyone else will have to. It's one of the hardest tournaments to win, the biggest purse, and everyone wants to win. Everyone wants to win it. So call it what you want, Love said. If Scottie Scheffler and Rory McIlroy, who have each won it twice too, call it a major, it'll be a major. McIlroy, with a wide smile creasing his face, cracked that he'd love to be credited with 7 majors instead of his current tally of 5. But while he is quick to classify the Players as one of the best golf tournaments in the world, he doesn't think it needs to be considered a major. I'm a traditionalist. I'm a historian of the game. We have 4 major championships, you know. If you want to see what 5 major championships look like, look at the women's game. I don't know how well that's went for them, McIlroy said. I think the Players has got it nailed. The Players is an amazing tournament in its own right, and I don't think it's being classified a major or not as a major makes it any more or any less, McIlroy said. It stands on its own without the label, he added. It doesn't need to be anything else. The modern Grand Slam was conceived on an overseas flight to Scotland for the 1960 British Open at St Andrews by none other than Arnold Palmer, who had won the Masters and U.S. Open that year and lamented that he wasn't eligible to win the U.S. Amateur and British Amateur, which were part of the Grand Slam won by amateur great Bobby Jones in 1930, pre-Masters the tournament he later created. The only time a player has completed the Grand Slam in a single season. Tiger Woods held all 4 major trophies at the same time, a remarkable feat, but not in the same calendar year. Palmer's longtime local scribe, Bob Drum of the Pittsburgh Press, suggested they could conceive a new version and spread Palmer's words as gospel of the Masters, PGA Championship, U.S. Open, and British Opens as golf's version of the Grand Slam. If the media is going to again crown a change to the majors, or addition to the number of majors, it may be led by Brendan Shambles, a former tour pro and current analyst, who not only has argued that the Players is deserving of major status, but it's better than the 4 actual majors, noting it has the deepest field in golf, and that TPC Sawgrass, the annual venue designed by Pete Dye, is arguably the best golf course that they play a major championship on from a shot value perspective. So in every single way that a metric could be used to measure whether something is a major, Chambly continued, the Players, to me, stands alone and above the other 4 majors championships as not just a major, it is, in my estimation, the best major. Winners aside, who's losing NFL free agency? From Nate Davis. The NFL free agency market officially opened March 11th. Now, it pretty much looks like it's been raided by hurricane preppers right before landfall. And maybe that's an appropriate metaphor, given the way the league has been upended in recent days, particularly so in the wake of the figurative storm generated by the now infamous Max Crosby trade that was arranged but never consummated by the Baltimore Ravens and Las Vegas Raiders. Never consummated by the Ravens anyway. That was far and away the biggest story in a frenzied few days of constant developments, pending free agents entering into negotiations on March 9th, while the Crosby trade and others were framed up to last week. So now, let's sort through the aftermath as we declare free agency losers. Max Crosby. You have to feel for the guy. He's still injured, 2 months out from his meniscus surgery, yet he now carries the stigma of a failed physical from the Ravens that, after being offloaded by the Raiders, a wayward organization he had been fiercely loyal to and taken unabashed pride in ever since former general manager Mike Mayock made him a 4th-round pick in 2019. It had to be a 100-hour emotional roller coaster for Crosby, one of the league's very best players, kicked to the curb twice in that span, sandwiched around the hope he might finally play for a contender. But he vowed anew, "I'm a Raider," in a social media post late March 12th. For how long? Who's to say? The NFL man, almost strictly business. Ravens GM Eric DeCosta. The team and its general manager took a big check swing, on Crosby, the first player the 30-year-old organization has ever attempted to acquire with first-round draft capital. And DeCosta had committed to spending this year's round 1 selection and next year's, until he didn't. It all fell apart the night of March 10th, when the Raiders announced the Ravens had stunningly backed out of the trade. DeCosta, seemingly trying to govern his emotions, said the next day he was gutted by the decision, but was acting in the franchise's best interests. In the meantime, several of his best players walked out the door. Pro Bowl center Tyler Linderbaum notably defecting to the Raiders, and tight end Isaiah Likely reuniting with former Ravens coach John Harbaugh in New York with the Giants. While DeCosta was left in scramble mode, signing defensive end Trey Hendrickson, something of a Crosby light. History will judge that the Crosby non-trade, but DeCosta may have to repair his reputation among his peers in the meantime. Raiders GM John Spytek. The Silver and Black's second-year GM appeared to generate quite a win by leveraging Crosby for those first 2 rounders they were going to add jet fuel to the organizational rebuild as it lays the groundworks to remain presumed number 1 pick quarterback Fernando Mendoza next month. Given how upset Crosby was when Spytek and the team shut down late last season, even after the 5-time Pro Bowler had gutted through his knee injury for most of the season, this was probably the optimal time for a divorce. And with Crosby off to Baltimore, Spytek wants to work spending the Raiders' mountain of cap space and executing a forward-looking plan. Then Crosby, and a fully guaranteed $30 million salary for 2026, boomerang back onto the cap, necessitating an altered approach and, at this point, likely major repairs to the bridge between the player and his once and future home. Tough deal all the way around. Indianapolis Colts GM Chris Ballard. They managed to retain wide receiver Alec Pierce and quarterback Daniel Jones, who received the transition tag before being extended. But that happened at exorbitant cost, giving Ballard couldn't get those deals done until the 11th hour. And really after the 11th hour, Pierce, who has all of 157 receptions in 4 seasons, landed the largest contract, 4 years, $114 million, any receiver entering free agency ever had, but not to be confused with the even richer extension players like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and CeeDee Lamb, struck with their original clubs over the years. Bottom line, a team that started 7-4 in 2025, but fell apart after that, a good chunk of that before Jones' season-ending Achilles tear, is largely moving laterally. That isn't fully accurate, given Ballard lost defensive end Kwity Paye and right tackle Braden Smith, and was compelled to trade wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr., while basically being precluded from targeting a quality pass rusher like Hendrickson. Whether or not Jones is ready to play in Week 11 is yet to be determined. Jacksonville Jaguars. A 13-4 team that won the AFC South in 2025 was as big a stunner as any last season, but the Jags, who have no first-round draft pick in 2026 due to their still questionable trade for wide receiver cornerback Travis Hunter last year, also weren't able to retain key players like linebacker Devin Lloyd and Beaver receiver Travis Etienne Jr. Work to do here. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, GM Jason Licht. A team that just said goodbye to the playoffs for the first time since 2019 also had to say goodbye to longtime wide receiver Mike Evans and cornerback Jamal Dean and defensive lineman Logan Hall. Licht did manage to add linebacker Alex Anzalone, running back Kenneth Gainwell, and defensive lineman Alshon Robinson, and keep tight end Cade Otton. But it was largely a departure for a team that typically takes so much pride in drafting, developing and retaining its core players, and it was certainly a personal blow to Licht, who lamented losing Evans, the first player he ever drafted, back in 2014. Los Angeles Chargers. Anything behind door number 2? The Bolts, who were, and still are, awash in cap space, didn't appear to make a high-impact move aside from retaining offensive linebacker Khalil Mack. But they couldn't keep offensive linebacker Odafe Oweh, who is 8 years younger than 35-year-old Mack. The Chargers were probably never going to be in the market for interdivisional headache Crosby, and now they apparently still have to face him twice per season. But maybe Alec Ingold and blocking tight end Charlie Kolar can negate Med Max. Dallas Cowboys. Anything behind door number 2? Owner Jerry Jones, as he does, signaled, "I can see us being aggressive in free agency during the scouting combine." But the Cowboys, as they typically don't this time of year, haven't done a whole lot. Unless you consider signing safeties Jalen Thompson and P.J. Locke, adding pass rusher Rashawn Gary in a trade and exporting defensive tackle Osa Ozawa and Solomon Thomas in other deals as aggressive. Beating the Ravens to Crosby or engaging that pursuit now, that would have been aggressive. Jamie Gibbs. He lost his Sonic and Knuckles wingman, running back David Montgomery, traded by the Detroit Lions to the Houston Texans. Often injured Isaiah Pacheco arrives as Montgomery's replacement. Yet Gibbs may be taking on a bigger workload, which could be good, but less can often be more when it pertains to NFL running backs. Geno Smith. He reportedly wanted to go to Miami. He wound up back where he started, with the New York Jets. And maybe Smith's second stint as quarterback of the New York Jets goes better than the first. And maybe he's been set up as the fall guy for a team that has seemed focused on 2027 ever since its talent purge during last year's trades deadlines. 2024 first-round quarterbacks. The Atlanta Falcons injured Michael Penix Jr., likely losing his starting job in 2026 to Tua. The Minnesota Vikings injured J.J. McCarthy, likely losing his starting job in 2026 to Kyler Murray. The Denver Broncos injured Bo Nix. He's probably okay, even though his defense took hits, and the re-signing of often injured running back J.K. Dobbins and blocking tight end Adam Troutman are the most notable moves on offense. NFL superstars. In the era of ever-expanding salary cap, it seems like the best never get the opportunity to gauge their worth in the free agency market. Doesn't mean anyone needs to shed a tear for the Ikes of Chase or Micah Parsons or Josh Allen, all of them getting plenty rich while landing extensions from their teams. But imagine if a player of that ilk got to incite a bidding war on the open market at a time when the salary cap fiscal spigot is wide open. You've been listening to a reading of the USA Today for March 13th. We read the USA Today weekdays at noon. For more information, call us at 716-821-5555. Your reader for this hour has been Nancy.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have episode number 52, the conclusion of Mark Twain by Ron Chernow. Following that at 3 o'clock is New York Magazine. At 4 o'clock, a re-airing of today's Buffalo News. Stay with us for these readings and more. You're listening to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Radio Reading serves people who are blind or have a print disability throughout Western New York and Southern Ontario's Niagara Peninsula. From its broadcast studios at 1199 Harlem Road in Cheektowaga, just north of Clinton Street. Almost 40 years and more than 300,000 hours of radio readings to those unable to read printed matter on their own. Our broadcast signal is provided at no charge by WNED. Volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings of newspapers, magazines, and books. For more information on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, call us at 821-5555. You're listening to your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Our volunteer radio readers broadcast daily readings 24 hours a day of newspapers, magazines, books, and other printed matter. People who are blind.
The Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a serialized reading